Most confusion comes from unclear direction, not lazy teams. If your team cannot say what matters, what does not, and what done looks like, your project will drift. Today we will set intent, define done, and write smart objectives that guide action. Welcome to People, Process, Progress. I'm Kevin Pinnell, author of The Stability Equation, 7 Pillars for a More Balanced Life, and The People, Process, and Progress of Project Management. This show is about how we put people first, keep process aligned, and make progress together. I share lessons from my time in the Navy, public safety, healthcare, information technology, and from training in the gym and on the jiu-jitsu mats. So let's jump in and make some progress together. I once kicked off a project with strong energy, detailed plan, we had milestones, we had meetings, and we had people who cared, which is the most important thing. What we did not have was a shared definition of done. Half the team thought finished meant creating a draft, while the other half thought it meant a fully polished product ready for release. We, quote, finished twice, trust slip, timeline took a hit, right? But once we realized we were spinning, we stopped, regrouped, and then rewrote leaders' intent, made sure we had a clear definition of done, and a few smart objectives, right? And that reset brought the team back together, same people, better clarity, better progress. So today we're going to go through people, process, and progress of how to get leaders' intent, how to define definition of done, how to write smart objectives, which I've talked about quite a bit because it's so important, how we can measure our progress, and some actions you can take away to restart or reevaluate or start fresh with the projects that you're leading. So let's get into people, right? The most important thing. So before you set up processes and start tracking progress, you have to get the people aligned. A project team will always have different perspectives, and if those perspectives are not connected to a shared understanding, the project risks getting pulled in too many directions. So this section is about building clarity up front with the sponsor, the business owner, and then the team, so we all understand what matters, what does not, who decides what. When the people piece is strong, usually everything else flows much more smoothly. And for me, I've worked with police chiefs or chief operating officers for national level planned events and in response to horrible tragedies. And I share that because in each of these interactions, leaders' intent was critical. Right? Sometimes the intent was given proactively. Other times it had to be drawn out through questions and clarifications. And for us as program project managers, leaders, we have to do that sometimes. That's our soft skills kicking in. But in every case, it was vital that the boots or high heels, if you're in the office on the ground, knew exactly what was expected. Right? Without that clarity, the risk of missteps or wasted effort skyrockets. So let's start with this alignment, right? This leader's intent. It is usually set by the sponsor or the main decision maker, but for us as project managers, we're going to have to help them define this or write it out or understand like, hey, this would be real helpful for our team to know very overtly. Like we're going to tell them this, right? We're going to write it into, a one sentence that the team can remember. So here's what this sounds like. We will deliver a new scheduling process to improve efficiency and reduce confusion. We will not add extra steps or features that slow people down, right? So we get, what do we want to do? What do we not want to do? And the clarity on this is like who owns the strategic calls, who owns the technical choices, who owns day-to-day delivery. But we know the leader wants us to deliver a new scheduling process that's going to improve efficiency and reduce confusion without adding extra steps and features that slow people down, right? So the prompt that we could take to our team is, hey, here's our intent in one line, right? Here's who makes the decisions. Here's what done means at a high level, what is unclear, and ask them. So we get this done, we get this intent, and we get this conversation, which we should be having regularly with our project teams, with our leaders of all levels, to help them understand what are we putting all this time and effort and money and resources towards. So now that we kind of have an understanding of getting people aligned, a basic understanding, again, go to peopleprocessprogress.com for more. Check out the People, Process, and Progress of Project Management on Amazon. I dive deeper into that. So let's talk about process. What do we do now that we started these conversations? Well, once the people are more aligned, the process will give them structure to follow, right? Without process, even the most motivated teams can spin their wheels and waste energy and money. The key is not to overload them with layers of bureaucracy though, right? But rather to establish just enough structure to make sure that everyone is working toward the same outcome. So a good process creates consistency, right? Without becoming a burden. And you all have probably seen this. There's some administrative overhead that is just too much. It's like, well, you're not doing exactly like this. But I'll say, as you read, if you read, and I hope you do, the People, Process, and Progress of Project Management, It's a book I put together that I wish I had when I started. There are plenty of processes to choose from, right? Waterfall, agile, blended methods, even models like the incident command system from public safety. But what matters most is not that you pick the right one from a book or from the PMP. What matters is that everyone knows what process you are following in plain, practical terms. What did we just do? What are we doing now? What is coming next? Right? That's a super basic way to do it. That is a shared rhythm that keeps the team moving in sync, right? Instead of drifting apart. So I'm going to circle back to that intent because, again, the leader's intent sets the tone for everything else. It gets us to objectives, to our definition of done. And I want to give you a formula. So part of the process of helping that leader develop the intent is, and I'll include this on the post on the peopleprocessprogress.com website for this episode, but we will, and then in brackets, deliver what? For, in brackets, who, in order to, brackets, desired outcome, right? We will not, in brackets, list what we must avoid. And this would be measured by, in brackets, success signals like, percent increase, reduced money, time saving, right? Within brackets, time frame. So it's kind of like a SMART objective. A lot of those elements are in there, but it's coming from the sponsor. It's not necessarily the objectives we're going to plan all the tactical stuff towards, and it's for every aspect of the project. So again, let's go back to the earlier example we talked about. We'll deliver a new scheduling process for the team in order to improve efficiency and reduce confusion. We will not create extra steps that slow people down or build features that no one asked for. Right? And success will be measured by task completion rates, fewer scheduling conflicts within the next quarter. Now, the challenge of these is, are you set up to measure those before and then measure them after? Right? But I think versions like this keep the direction clear while protecting the team from scope creep. And, we'll still get into the technical requirements, but it should help us not over-engineer things or make unintended outcomes that don't really have to do with the leader's intent, or, as we'll talk about now, defining the definition of done, right? This is what finished really means. So, for example, all the major parts are complete. Work has been tested or reviewed. End users and customers confirm it works for them. Documentation or instructions are updated. No major loose ends were made. Now, these are basic elements because, there are so many examples, and you all probably have some too. But if you can say done looks like this, right? It can be one paragraph. It can be bullets like I just, talked through or read through in my notes. But it needs to be really clear what that means, right? And you can have a checklist. So what I just had, and again, I'll include this on the site, and check out the book again. A lot of stuff's in there. I know I'm pushing it, but it's very helpful. So the definition of done should be really clear to the team of, we are trying to get to this thing, and that means we have done all these things. And in the book, I outline the example is setting up a new computer for a user, right? So it's making sure that the network port works, making sure that the computer's set up, the power works, it turns on, Windows boots or Mac, whatever OS you're using, the peripherals work, I can print to somewhere, the software on it works, right? We have all these steps of just for one PC, let alone a whole deployment somewhere of a bunch of those. So keeping in this process, let's talk about SMART objectives, right? It's one of my favorite things to do. And I've talked about the importance of these quite a bit because it's huge, right? They're critical, and they should be and can be tied to every task on a project, right? How do we get there in the civilian world? We take a fuzzy goal and we sharpen it. So let's say we have a vague goal. Let's launch a new process. Someone says, and they give us the money and the resources, and we go, cool, let's refine that. So we'll deliver a scheduling process used by all team members, tested in real operations. It's pretty smart. We will not launch until at least 90% of users confirm it's easier to follow, right? So we're starting to say, hey, 90% have to say, yep, it is easier. That means we're probably going to be a little more iterative and less purely waterfall, right? Because to me, that says, hey, we're not going to launch, so we're going to let them see it, get the feedback and change it, let them see it, and then we'll launch, right? It'll be completed within 12 weeks. So we can put all those together. So let's talk about, and part of the process for us, whether you're a full-time project manager, you're a nurse, or you're a construction worker, or you're whomever that was asked to take on a project, you're a firefighter that's now in charge of changing something in your department. Here are quick ways to put this together. I talk about charters. Again, there's examples that I have in the book. But charter or kickoff notes. Kickoff is when you kick off, you start the project, you have a meeting, you're talking through it, right? Include the intent, read it out loud. We will do this, we will not do this. Make it super obvious that the leader's intent is this. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we will not do. Any questions, right? You can have a task board or a backlog. Backlog is an agile thing if you're not familiar with that. You're going to paste the definition of done, right, in each story template, or we're going to have a list of it, or we're going to show it on the screen in a Zoom call, right? If you're hybrid or in person, however you want to do it, but make that look like here's done. Here's all the things. So kind of in scope, if you will, from the charter. The timeline or the sprint plan, right? We're going to have SMART objectives at the top, positive, negative guardrails. So it's kind of a blend of a hybrid that I'm kind of mentioning. But the SMART objectives, the way I like to do it of a basic charter is, and kind of an updated thing that I've had to revise as I've learned new techniques and realized what's working well, what's not, is what's the intent? What does done look like? What are the objectives? What's our high level schedule when we think it's going to be 6 months, right? What's our budget? What's in scope? What's out of scope? Who are the resources we're pretty sure we need? And you can fit all that on one document, one slide, one system you use online, and it's all right there. And so when I kick off a project, I'm going to have that on the screen or in the room or however you're going to present it. And I'm going to talk through all of it. And it's going to be super clear. It's going to be with the sponsor there, with the business owner, with other key stakeholders. And we're going to lay it out. So right from the start, and we know things will change during the project, but right from the start, everyone understands the intent, definition of done, and the SMART objectives. So progress is not just about moving forward. So we're going to talk about that, right? It's about moving forward in the right direction, because we can measure numbers, and I've talked about this before, but that doesn't mean we're actually making progress, right? A project can feel busy, but if the updates aren't tied to the intent or the definition of done, then the activity may not add up to the results, right? We can be reporting on something, but it has nothing to do with what we're, guided to do or not do. But we need to track what matters, communicate it in a way that builds trust, right? It also means staying honest about where things stand so problems can be solved early. And I've talked about that here on the podcast before too. Transparency, objectivity, openness, that's key. And as we measure, we need to do this with both our hard skills and soft skills, right? It's not enough to only track timelines, budgets, and story points. We also need to pay attention to the team dynamic, right? How are they doing? What's the emotional state of our stakeholders? Are they engaged? Are they checked out? Do they understand the value of the work? And sometimes when we're on the far end of getting technology together, we don't see the user end, whether they bought it in a store or they're using it in a hospital or on a construction site or in the firehouse or the precinct, right? So we need to make sure they also understand what's the value of all this work that you're doing. Or do they feel like they're just going along for the ride? So I think if we can combine those human signals with some of the hard data we should be tracking, and again, I have ideas about that in the book, and I'll talk about those here more on the podcast, is it lets us make better decisions during the project, right? It helps us improve our own processes during the project, after, and beyond. It also provides visibility into how we're really doing against that intent, the leader's intent, against the SMART objectives and our definition of done. So let's talk about kind of how we can report a very basic way, right? So we're going to report against what we define, not against our guesses, okay? So what happened? We finished 10 tasks that met the definition of done. That's pretty legit. That's super simple. It's straightforward, right? What's coming next? Well, we'll complete the review stage with 3 more deliverables. And what do we need? We need feedback from 2 stakeholders this week, right? That's one thing you always want to include when you're being succinct and asking for something, is either say, I need your help or I don't. And when you ask for help, be specific on what you need help with, right? The metrics that I think we should track with a project, and we've talked about this system, right, that's going to reduce time, is how compliant are we with the definition of done? Are these tasks directly tied to it? And that can be very subjective, not as objective. Are we making progress toward those SMART objectives? So those specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based objectives, are we truly tying our work to that? How's our progress? Often shows up as % complete in a project plan. It's kind of high level, but it's good to dive into those a little bit more. And then what's the feedback or acceptance from users or stakeholders? Are they grumbling and they're like, I don't want this to happen, but maybe the whole organization made the decision? Or are they like, I love it. Thanks for letting us give feedback. I love this iterative process, right? All good things to track. The feedback is hard later in a project if you're doing like a survey or something, but during getting this feedback, having these feedback sessions or work sessions or stand-ups or however you're going to do it is very valuable, right? And so how can you measure this progress on a regular basis? What are some tools and techniques? Well, a daily stand-up when you're really in the thick of it, in the building, especially when you're getting feedback from stakeholders. And this is a challenge of, and I'll get into more agile stuff and Scrum and things like that, is what are any quick blockers or definitions of done check, right? And you can do that daily. So let's say you're doing a week or 2 sprint, which means you need time from people every day, from the people you're building this thing for, which is hard to do, and from your team, your IT team, or whoever's building this. But you need to know, what are the challenges for us? What are the blockers that are keeping us from doing something? And hey, users that are going to use this, are we headed in the right direction, right? And then once a week, send a 1-page summary, right? Here's where we are with the intent, the status, the compliance, stoplight status, red, yellow, green, right? Red is we're critical or something similar. At risk means, we got some issues, but we're working through it. Red typically to mean means like we need some help or we're working through, we don't quite have a plan to address these things yet. And then green doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's doing pretty well. And we need to have regular reviews, right? Not just for our project, but compared with others, talk to our other folks in the programs and portfolio of projects we work, right? And confirm that it's still valuable, right? Especially as we look at our whole portfolio and our backlog and things like that. So I've talked a lot. Let's share an action that I think would be helpful for you, the listener, and probably your teams, right? Write your leader's intent in one sentence using we will and we will not. What I talked about earlier in the podcast, rewind if you need to hear it again. But just keep it simple. As a leader or a hypothetical leader, right? If you're thinking about how can I help my sponsor of this project do this, ask them, what do you want us to do? What will we do? And what do you not want us to do, right? List 3 non-negotiables for your definition of done for some project that you're going to do or a hypothetical one. And then write a few SMART objectives, right, that include both. And I talk about these. If you go to peopleprocessprogress.com, I talk about the 7 pillars of project management. These are there so you can dive deeper into that. And post it where your team will see it daily, right? Or whether you use some online board, a whiteboard, if you're still in the office or going back and forth, whatever that is. It's very important. But it's good to run through these and do these for each project, regardless of the size of it, because that's how you get the muscle memory and the reps. So in closing, we know we're going to keep people first, right? We're going to use a process that fits our current team and our current project, our current initiative, and we'll take from other stuff, but it doesn't have to be the same every single time. Some companies, I think, are too rigid that way. Some maybe aren't rigid enough. And so let's find that middle ground. And we want to see progress, right? We're going to have numbers, but we want to know that our team is getting along, that their tempo is good, that they're working together. They're not just silent on every call and you're the only one talking if you're the facilitator. That's progress you can see, or progress that you're not making that you can see that you need to do something about, along with the data and their percentages and all that kind of stuff. I know I've mentioned it a few times, but if you want more field-tested tools and checklists, not just from me, but that I've learned throughout my time from other mentors, but they're in one place. They're in either Kindle, paperback, hardcover. Check out the book, People Process Progress of Project Management on Amazon. You'll find very practical resources you can apply right away. It's not a certification book. It's not a get ready for certification. It's a field guide to help you actually lead projects that work and keep it simple and use what's right for the time. So you can also connect with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and X. On Instagram and X, I'm at PennellKG. YouTube, it's People Process Progress. Go figure. I'm Kevin Pennell on LinkedIn. You can listen to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all the places podcasts are, right, under People Process Progress. So let's keep the conversation going, share what's working for you, and learn from one another. Until next time, remember, keep those people first, align your processes, and we'll all make progress together. Godspeed, y'all.